thank you for this opportunity to join your meeting here on the Biodiversity Alliance, which is extremely important for all of us. 2 years ago, in Belém, the presidents of the 8 countries got together, the presidents of the 8 countries of the Amazon, and they strengthened again the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. When I say they strengthened it, they came to an agreement in many points. But I can say the main points or the main categories that we can talk about or we can mention or are going to mention right now are 3. One is avoid the tipping point. And when they were talking about avoiding the tipping point, of course, we all know the importance of the Amazon. We know what will happen if it becomes a civilization. We know that we will lose the water that is essential for over 70% of the GDP of all South America. We know that the temperature will go up 2 degrees. We know it will be a global disaster. So obviously, avoiding the tipping point is fundamental. And yet, I would just like to highlight something here, that avoiding the tipping point, we have to stop deforestation, and the countries are doing the best. We have to do restoration, and they're also doing a great job. And we talk about 30-30. Now, if the Amazon were a country, we have 47% under protection, and we're still collapsing. So it's not just a question of how many hectares we are covering. Each country is doing a great job. But how does the system work? How does it function? Where are we restoring? What are we connecting? How are we keeping the system going? That's the fundamental point. We have to consolidate a lot. It is fundamental to measure this by how many hectares, but also it's fundamental to measure this by what has been called environmental services or environmental contributions to the global system and the global life. This is fundamental. How much water we are producing in what we have called the flying rivers. How are we keeping down the temperatures? How are we resilient to the fires? What is happening there? How is the system resilient? How is the system operating? And therefore, I think we have to look at the Amazon as a bioma and how it works. It is not enough. It is fundamental, and yet not enough to talk about the 8 countries and what they're doing. It is fundamental. And that is part of my job, to promote the collaboration, or it is my job, to promote the collaboration among the 8 countries to protect the well-being of the forest, the well-being of environmental well-being, and the social well-being of the rainforest. But it is also fundamental that we see this as a system and we work as a system. That we join the efforts of the countries, of all the 8 countries, in this sense. That we make a commitment of all the 8 countries that we will all contribute in a binding agreement, in an important agreement, a binding agreement that we will collaborate to maintain the functioning of the rainforest, to avoid the tipping point. And there has been a suggestion which is very interesting, of creating a common NDC. That is an NDC, each country commits itself to collaborate with the other countries in protecting or in maintaining the functioning of the rainforest to prevent the tipping point. This is one of the topics that are being discussed now at the meeting in Bogota on the 22nd of August among the presidents, to take these ideas and these commitments to COP30 among the 8 countries. Another topic that they highlighted, the presidents, which is terribly important, of course, is sustainable development. And this has been spoken a lot. President Duque highlighted how this can be financed with natural capital, which is fundamental. We have to find new ways of financing and new ways of development for the rainforest. We cannot continue, obviously, with extractivism as we have done so far. We cannot go on looking at the Amazon as a collection of objects just to produce our well-being. We have to start looking at life as such in the Amazon, as this value, capital value. Just to give it a very simple example, we cannot only look at the coconut, we have to look at the coconut tree. We have to look at life. We have to see how it's working. And this is fundamental, and we're moving along those lines, and it is fundamental. And we have with these different bonus of carbon bonus, and we have biodiversity bonus, we're moving along those lines. but this is fundamental because the well-being of the 40 million people there has to be taken care of. We cannot protect the rainforest and protect the environment at the expense of the well-being of the people, but we cannot have the well-being of the people at the expense of the forest. So we must work together and create together. The third point that they brought up the presidents was the civil society participation. This didn't exist before in ACTO. Now it's brought up very strongly. It is undoubtedly necessary. We cannot do this, the governments cannot do this alone. We need the participation. It's fundamental, the participation of all, of the scientists, of the indigenous people, of the religious movements, of the academy. All of us have to participate if we want to protect the forest, if we want to save the forest. So this is fundamental also, and it's another point that's being discussed in Bogota right now to take to the COP30 being discussed by the presidents. The participation of the civil society as a fundamental, and that is what we are doing here, all of us, and I do hope that all of us will be able to come to COP30 and will be able to speak more or less, as far as possible, the same language, more or less the same view. Let us try and work together with the civil society, with the indigenous people that have been mentioned several times. They not only are terribly important. How much do we talk about biodiversity? How little do we talk about cultural diversity? There are different ways of being a human being. There are different ways of relating to the environment. The indigenous people are not talking about our rational scientific approach. They're talking about an intimate approach, a way of living with the forest. They are nature. Forest and they are one, and they live together. If we want to go back to nature, if we want to get back to nature, which we have to, the indigenous people inspire us. And we have the privilege still of having different ways of thinking in the Amazon. We should listen to them, we should support them, and not only benefit sharing, but that they sit at the table and that we start managing the forest together. So we have a lot to work, we're doing it. I wouldn't say we're optimistic. I do say we have to go on fighting, we have to go on struggling, because the situation is critical. But I do hope that now, in the next COP30, we will be able to go together, all of us, indigenous people, civil society, governments, along the same lines, and show the world that we are protecting the rainforest. Not only talking about the mitigation of CO2, because actually in the Amazon we don't produce or we don't emit more than 2%. At a global level, we're not that important. But certainly we're important if we're protecting the environment. Certainly we are important if we are protecting the biodiversity, if we are protecting the forest, the indigenous people, and the local people. So I do hope that we'll all be able to get together at the COP30 and really make a strong position to the world that we are doing this and we are really committed to protecting the rainforest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.